Hey there, sleep-deprived history buff. Tonight we're venturing into unsettling silence. Not peaceful quiet, but the hollow aftermath of an explosion authorities insist never occurred. You're no nuclear scientist, no first responder or structural engineer, just available. And in the 1986 Soviet Union, availability is the only qualification that matters. A clipboard declared you fit for service. Now here you stand, kilometers from a fractured reactor, wearing a canvas uniform and a badge that lies through its teeth about your proximity to death. The air carries a metallic rawness. Trees shed June leaves like it's autumn. The men beside you, the ones who know too much, can't stop retching. So before your boots start melting and fingernails detach soundlessly, drop a comment about where you're listening from and what ungodly hour found you here. I always wonder who else wanders these grim historical corridors after midnight. For early access to more whispered existential horrors, the Patreon link waits in the description. Now recline, steady your breathing, and ignore that faint tinnitus. Probably not neurological damage. Let's begin. You arrived by train, though no destination was disclosed. The schedule, blank. Windows fogged with sweat and radioactive ash. Someone murmurs you're near Pripyat, the name uttered like a curse. You step onto cracked concrete under a sky not overcast, but bleached. No welcoming committee, no briefing, just an officer with a clipboard and cigarette burned to the filter, waving you forward like luggage on a conveyor belt. No insignias, no smiles. You're ordered into formation. At least the standing and waiting feels familiar. You stand long enough to realize the wrongness runs deep. The air hangs thick, not with humidity, but like breathing through wet gauze. It smells faintly of ozone and submerged car batteries, like someone left stadium lights on in a swimming pool full of spark plugs. Around you, soldiers cough into sleeves and avoid eye contact. No conversation. Even birds are conspicuously absent. This isn't mere quiet. It's sterilized silence, a vacuum where sound used to exist before being scrubbed away. You've never experienced silence that makes your bones feel hollow. Eventually, someone hands you a form. Vague mentions of temporary reassignment and critical infrastructure restoration. A stamp, some Cyrillic, and a signature that looks rubber-stamped by someone 3 vodkas deep. No mention of radiation. No reactor references. Just local containment operations and advisories to avoid wildlife, standing water, and Western news broadcasts. They issue a canvas uniform 2 sizes too large, and rubber boots that squelch with each step. One man asks what exactly we're cleaning up. The officer says, nothing concerning. Conversation over. The trucks arrive before questions can multiply. You're loaded in back with a dozen others, mostly young, mostly mute. A few older men have the look of factory veterans or ex-soldiers, carrying secrets they'll take to unmarked graves. One mutters about graphite. Another slaps his arm. Just insects. There are no insects. The truck engine roars, but not loudly enough to drown the dread. You pass fields where wheat has turned ashen, trees that sag at unnatural angles like they're melting or mourning. A dog stands motionless in the road as the truck barrels toward it. You close your eyes before impact. You never hear the collision. On site, your first impression is controlled chaos. Too much military for a power plant. Too little organization for a military base. Tents sprout like mushrooms across the dirt. Geiger counters chatter in the hands of tight-lipped technicians. The air shimmers constantly, not with smoke or fog, but like heat waves rising from pavement that never cools. Every surface wears a fine dusting of particulate. You're told not to touch anything. You weren't planning to. You ask a medic in a stained vest what happened. He wipes his face with a rag. A fire. That's all. But you've seen fires. Fires don't leave birds dead in branches, or paint scorch marks across the sky. Fires don't make your skin itch beneath your shirt. Someone says it was a botched test. Another claims a turbine explosion. One insists there was no explosion at all, just a leak. But none look toward the wreckage. No one points. It's like they've collectively agreed to ignore the smoldering ruin at the compound's heart. Eventually, orders arrive printed on paper already curling at the edges, as if the ink itself is desperate to escape. Zone 3 perimeter debris operations. You ask what that entails. The officer grunts. You'll see. They hand you a shovel. Not new. The handle's worn smooth, the metal darkened with use. You wonder how many have held this before you, and how many still need shovels at all. No maps. No boundary explanations. Just a vague gesture toward the sarcophagus. And instructions to follow the markers. You ask what markers look like. No response. Behind you, men in full protective gear pass by carrying hoses. Their boots leave moon-like impressions in the dust. You note their gas masks with unease, wondering why they rate sealed gear while you get canvas and false assurances. By hour's end, you stop asking questions. Not from satisfaction, but because no one's listening. This place feels like a nightmare constructed from warnings and lies. You cling to basic facts, your name, your hometown, but they already feel distant, like details from a half-remembered film. The only truth anyone offers. Don't touch anything you can't afford to bury. Radiation's cruelty lies in its invisibility. No scent, no texture, no warning until it's rewriting your cells beyond repair. Unlike fire, it doesn't crackle. Unlike bullets, it doesn't whine past your ear. Radiation is horrifically polite. It simply moves in, unpacks inside your body, and begins rearranging you with the calm precision of an assassin who knows the clock is on their side. They tell you almost nothing, of course. You're issued a dosimeter, a chunky little badge that clicks intermittently, flashing numbers you've never been trained to interpret, told to wear it always like some protective talisman. What they omit: many dosimeters malfunction. Some max out without warning. The readout freezing not because danger passed, but because the danger exceeded the device's capacity to care. For perspective, the average banana delivers 0.1 microsieverts, thanks to natural potassium, 40. A chest x-ray, about 100 bananas worth. Full body CT scan, 10,000 bananas. The rooftop you're approaching? Let's just say you're not eating a few bunches. You've become the banana. The core itself emitted doses lethal within 60 seconds. Not hyperbole. Basic physics. But you're not on the core, thankfully. You're working around it, near it, adjacent to it. That distinction is supposed to comfort you. It doesn't, even at your permitted distance. Some surfaces are so radioactive, you'd absorb a year's background radiation just by sitting on them during lunch break. Not that you get lunch breaks. Radiation doesn't respect meal times. Doesn't care that you're 23, relatively healthy, with plans to visit your cousin in Minsk next month. It just seeps through walls, through clothing, through you. Radiation's internal havoc depends on variables beyond your control. Type: alpha/beta/gamma/neutron. Dose: how much, how fast. Your own biological lottery ticket. Genes/age/bad luck. Once inside, it starts smashing cells. Like a drunk wrecking crew with sledgehammers. It shreds DNA, corrupts cellular instruction manuals, destroys the machinery regulating growth, decay, death. Sometimes cells panic and shut down. Sometimes they mutate. Sometimes they forget their purpose entirely and multiply with the coordination of a spreadsheet engulfed in flames. Radiation rarely kills directly. It triggers chain reactions. It frays your immune system, scars lung tissue, turns your gastrointestinal tract into a war zone. Your body starts failing at microscopic processes. You never realized it was constantly performing correctly. Bruises appear easier. Cuts refuse to heal. Gums swell. Bones ache. Stomach knots and stays knotted. It lacks cinematic drama. Just relentless, internal erosion. You can't flee what's already behind your ribs, ticking. You'd assume they'd brief you on protection, but most around you are equally clueless. Some got pamphlets with vague hygiene protocols. Don't touch exposed metal. Avoid open water sources. Wear ill-fitting gloves. Others received nothing at all. Rumors swirl that officers got better gear. Actual briefings. Functional dosimeters. But that's above your pay grade. Besides, envy wastes energy. When your white blood cell count is already imitating the Titanic. There's something quintessentially Soviet about this catastrophe. A disaster this vast, this complex. Reduced to mandatory optimism. You're told not to worry. Told to keep working. Untold readings are within acceptable limits. A phrase so elastic it could describe soup temperature, or your impending organ failure. You believe it because the alternative is worse. The alternative is admitting you're being slowly poisoned by something indistinguishable from nothing at all. Some men treat dosimeters like talismans, tapping them nervously, shaking them like malfunctioning magic 8 balls. Others ignore theirs completely, stuffing them in pockets, or leaving them in barracks, to avoid confronting what they already suspect. Fear needs a face to feel real, but radiation is faceless fog. It doesn't growl from bushes, or slither through vents. It simply exists, all around you, all the time. Eventually, you stop thinking about it. You accept the copper taste, ignore the persistent rash, blame fatigue on poor sleep, dizziness on dehydration. You grow accustomed to feeling worse each morning. You stop asking how many sieverts kill a man. Start asking how many a man can absorb. Before anyone notices he's dying, you stop fearing exposure. Start fearing the silence afterward. Because here, no one tells you when you've had enough. They just stop calling your name at roll call. You're issued equipment from the back of a faded truck that once carried potatoes and dignity, but has long since run out of both. The quartermaster doesn't speak. He gestures. You hold out your hands and receive what might generously be called a uniform. It's more of a sack with sleeves. The fabric is stiff with industrial starch, smelling of damp storage and chemical soap. The trousers have a drawstring waist that refuses to stay tied. The jacket buttons seem sewn on by someone with a personal grudge against symmetry. No labels, no sizes. If it fits, it's purely accidental. Your boots are rubber, the kind used in flooded basements or dairy farms. They squelch when you walk, trapping sweat until your feet feel like overcooked dumplings. The soles are thin enough that every rock, every warped metal plate beneath you presses up like a dull knife. There's a chemical stench baked into them, something between disinfectant and tire glue. After an hour, you can't tell if the smell is coming from the boots or your own dissolving skin. Then there's the mask. In theory, it's surgical grade, a flimsy rectangle of gauze with ear loops that dig into your skin. The wire meant to pinch over your nose doesn't. Within minutes, it sags damp against your mouth, trapping your breath, your sweat, and doing absolutely nothing to stop radioactive particles from sliding straight through. You see others using scarves, handkerchiefs, even t-shirts wrapped 3 times around their faces. It's theater, a ritual, something to convince yourself you're doing something useful. You might as well strap a screen door to your face. At least then you'd get better airflow. Gloves are another joke. If you're lucky, they're rubber. Most are a brittle polymer that cracks along the fingers within hours. Some are clearly reused, stained at the fingertips, patched with tape, or marked with initials from a previous owner who may or may not still have hands. They're handed out by size, which means indiscriminately. You watch one man wrap bandages around his wrists just to keep them from sliding off. They don't block moisture, barely block the wind, but they're mandatory, so you wear them even when they turn your palms into blisters. For the privileged few, or the catastrophically unlucky, there's the lead apron. Exactly what it sounds like, a heavy slab of lead cloth that hangs over your chest like a radiation-themed bib. In theory, it shields against gamma rays. If you stand perfectly still, facing the threat, which you never do. It weighs enough to strain your shoulders, shifts constantly, traps heat until your shirt is soaked through, salt rings forming at your collar. Some men ditch it at the first opportunity. Others cling to it like a superstition. One wires his shut to keep it from flapping. Another tapes his with old gauze in desperation. The helmet is the crowning absurdity. Standard issue military surplus, left over from when wars were fought with bullets, not isotopes. Excellent protection against low ceilings, falling debris, or an officer's frustration. Useless against the invisible energy currently tunneling into your bloodstream. But it completes the ensemble, makes you feel official. So you clench your jaw and wear it anyway. Because without it, you'd look exactly like what you are. An under-equipped man in a nightmare he doesn't understand. You learn quickly this gear wasn't designed for comfort, survival, or sanity. It exists to check boxes, so some bureaucrat can scrawl adequate protection distributed on a report. You realize this the first time you peel it off. The inside of your jacket is soaked through. Your socks wrung out like sponges. Your undershirt has fused to your skin with salt and grime. You stink, not just of sweat, but of metal, chemicals, and something sour, unfamiliar, like mold crossed with static electricity. Undressing becomes damage assessment. You peel each layer slowly, inspecting the rash on your forearm, the welts along your hips where the waistband sawed at you. You rotate your boots to keep blisters from layering over old ones. You scratch your neck until it bleeds, then wrap it with a torn strip of towel. You're not alone. Every man around you is red-eyed, raw-skinned, hunched forward like his clothes are slowly digesting him. Rumors circulate about better gear. Sealed suits, real respirators, gloves that don't disintegrate like pastry dough. But those are for the reactor core teams. Or so they say. Some believe those suits exist only in propaganda reels. Others swear they've seen them, worn by men who never remove their helmets and never speak to anyone else. Either way, you won't be getting any. Not here. Not in your pay grade. After days, the gear stops feeling like something you put on. It becomes a second skin, worse than your own. You stop noticing the stench. Stop complaining about the itch. Grow accustomed to the creeping certainty that your protection is failing at its one job. Safety becomes less a fact than a wish. Something you whisper to yourself as you step into another dust cloud, another sealed building, another moment pretending your body isn't absorbing something that will never, ever leave. At first, the plan was to use machines, robots, remote-controlled marvels of Soviet engineering designed to withstand radiation and perform delicate cleanup from a safe distance. That's what the officials claimed, anyway. That's what they told the foreign press. The reality? The machines worked about as well as everything else in the Soviet Union. Barely. Briefly. Then not at all. Their circuits fried. Their motors jammed. Their sensors, if they had any, spat out nonsense before going blind. One robot wheeled itself in tight circles until it toppled over like a drunk toddler. Another stopped dead halfway through its route and began to smolder. The lead engineer called it a mechanical failure. The technician beside him muttered, "Suicide." So they turned to the next best option. You, and men like you, human beings, dubbed, with bitter irony, biorobots. Because if machines couldn't handle the job, clearly the solution was to send in something even more fragile. Flesh and bone wrapped in damp cloth. Barely protected, mostly expendable. They hand you a shovel, a pair of gloves with holes already worn through the thumbs, and instructions that boiled down to 3 words. Remove the debris. The debris, in this case, is radioactive graphite from the exploded reactor core. It's scattered across the roof of Reactor 3, lying there like ordinary rubble. If you don't know what you're looking at, but you've been told now, you know this is the stuff that kills in minutes, not hours. Minutes. Some of it is still hot, both thermally and radiologically. A single chunk can emit more radiation in 1 second than most people absorb in a year. Your only protection? Time. You're told your shift will last 90 seconds. Not a second more. Not out of concern for your safety, but because they've calculated how much exposure a body can take. Before becoming statistically inconvenient, you'll wear the usual, your canvas uniform, rubber boots, a lead apron that covers only part of your chest and flaps uselessly when you move. You'll sprint onto the roof, grab as many chunks as you can, hurl them into a waiting chute, then run back. That's the entire strategy. Human beings used as remote-controlled garbage claws. You wait at the roof's edge with 10 others, each of you silent, staring at your own feet like you're at the edge of a diving board no one wants to jump from. An officer holds a stopwatch and a whistle. When it blows, the first man runs. You watch him disappear around a corner. Hear the scrape of graphite against metal. Then the whistle again. The man returns gasping, face red, eyes too wide. He doesn't speak, just drops his shovel and walks away, staggering slightly, like his joints are already giving out. When it's your turn, your mind goes blank. You run. The roof is uneven, littered with shards of machinery, insulation, concrete, and graphite that glows faintly in the sunlight, like coal about to catch fire. The metal beneath your boots groans. Every step kicks up dust that sticks to your face, your clothes. You reach the first pile. Scoop. Toss. The graphite is heavier than it looks. It doesn't feel like rock, it feels wrong. Dense in a way that shouldn't exist in nature. Your hands shake. Your breathing is shallow. The air tastes like battery acid and burnt plastic. Your skin starts to itch beneath your clothes. You don't know how long you've been out here, only that your heartbeat is loud enough to drown out everything else. Then the whistle shrieks again. You turn. Run. The metal grates shiver underfoot. The railing blurs past. The stairs come up too fast. You hit the bottom on your hands and knees. The officer doesn't help you up. He scribbles on his clipboard and points to the next man. Your entire shift, 82 seconds. You're not allowed back. That's the rule. One roof shift per man. Some claim this shows a shred of humanity. Others say it's just logistics. No point sending the same man twice if his organs are already shutting down. So you're reassigned. Digging trenches, decontaminating trucks, moving bodies. Tasks that sound easier on paper, but carry their own flavors of invisible rot. You don't feel like a hero. You feel like an extension of your shovel. Later, you hear the term liquidator in official reports, as if your job had something to do with water. But you weren't extinguishing anything. You were collecting it, scooping it, moving it from one cursed pile to another. The fire was already out. What remained was just the cost of containing it. Reduction, relocation, delay. You realize your body was never meant to survive the work. It was meant to absorb the danger, hold it a while, then vanish before the numbers made anyone uncomfortable. You sleep poorly that night, not from nightmares, but because your skin burns. Your joints ache. There's a raw patch on your neck where your collar rubbed, and it won't stop stinging. You tell yourself it's just a rash, that you overexerted, that the symptoms mean nothing. It's what everyone does. You wake the next morning sore, nauseous, and ready for more orders. The machines couldn't handle the roof. You did, for 82 seconds. And someone wrote that down somewhere, in a folder no one will ever read. The stairs up to the rooftop are narrow and rusted, each step groaning under your boots like it might collapse at any moment. You grip the railing even though you've been told not to. It's metal, which means it's probably hot, not thermally, but radioactively. But right now, your legs are shaking too hard to care. Ahead of you, the man in front freezes at the top. An officer behind barks something sharp in Russian, impatient, final. The man steps forward onto the roof. Then it's your turn. You emerge into a different world. Not another place, exactly, just a place that shouldn't exist. The roof is a patchwork of broken panels, charred debris, warped steel plates twisted into shapes no human hands could have designed. You expected wreckage, but this is something worse, something diseased. The surface hisses faintly underfoot, like it's breathing. There's a shimmer in the air, not smoke, not heat, but a fine distortion, like reality struggling to render the scene correctly. You move forward as instructed. Your time has started. You can't see the man with the stopwatch anymore, but you know he's watching. You know he'll blow the whistle eventually, but not yet. So you shoulder your shovel, set your jaw, and walk toward the nearest pile of graphite. You don't know why you thought it would be dull gray, like textbook diagrams. Instead, it's blackened, fractured, veined with dark red streaks, like cooled lava, or dried blood. It doesn't look like something from inside a reactor. It looks like something that crawled out. Your gloves don't help. The graphite cuts right through them. You scoop as much as you can in one motion and hurl it toward the chute. It lands with a clatter that echoes too loudly for open air. You grab another piece. This one's heavier. You feel the weight drag at your arms, but also something else. A vibration. A hum. You don't know if it's real or just your nerves fraying, but either way, you move faster. The heat is worse than you imagined. Not just from the sun. The roof itself radiates warmth and pulses, like an oven that forgot to turn off. The soles of your boots soften. Every step sticks slightly, then pulls free. The air tastes chemical, sharp. Each breath feels thinner than the last. Your lungs work overtime, but draw in nothing useful. You cough once, then again. Now your head rings like someone's banging pots inside your skull. You keep going. Lift. Throw. Wipe sweat with your sleeve, already soaked through. Your vision blurs. You blink, but your eyes sting, tears too thick to clear anything. You can't stop, aren't allowed to stop. You don't know how much time has passed. The officer said you'd be pulled at 90 seconds, but the whistle hasn't blown. So you keep going. You trip, just for a second. Your foot catches on twisted rebar, and your knee slams into the metal. It's hot, not sun hot, poor hot. You scream without sound, just a dry exhale through clenched teeth. Roll to the side, get back up, fast, stupid, like your body's on autopilot. You leave a layer of skin behind on the roof. No time to check. Grab another fragment. This one flakes in your hand, dust clinging to your glove like ash. There's a crackle in your ears now. Maybe the Geiger counter. Maybe your hearing starting to fail. Your vision tunnels, like looking through a pipe. Your heart pounds so hard your ribs hurt. Then, finally, the whistle. One long blast. Too short. You drop the shovel without thinking and run. The way back is harder. Your limbs don't feel like yours anymore. They move, but sluggishly, like they're wrapped in wet wool. You stumble again. Catch yourself. Push forward. The metal staircase looms like a threat. You take the steps badly, unbalanced, half falling. You reach the bottom. Someone grabs your arm, steadies you. You want to thank them, but your tongue won't work. You're pulled aside, handed a bottle of water. It tastes like iron and mold. You drink it anyway. Your hands shake so badly you can't hold the bottle steady. Your face is bloodless. Your breath won't slow. A medic appears, shines a light in your eyes, says something. You don't process it. Just nod. Someone pats your shoulder. Good work. You don't respond. Your shift, 91 seconds. 1 second over. The officer scribbles on his clipboard and says nothing. You're told to rest, to sit in the shade, to eat something. You do none of those things. You stare at your gloves. They're torn. Your fingertips are red, blistered. Your uniform is scorched at the knees. You feel microwaved from the inside out. Somewhere in your body, something essential has shifted. You don't know what yet, just that it won't be coming back. You're not alone out here. There are thousands of others, some in uniform, some in oil-stained overalls, some in lab coats permanently marked with things they've stopped trying to wash out. They arrive in buses, on foot, by train, carrying duffel bags, toolboxes, folded documents, and the same expression you've come to recognize in every mirror. Cautious determination wrapped in quiet dread. No one says what they're really thinking, but you see it in their eyes. Everyone is doing the math. How long will I be here? How much can I take? What's this worth? The man in the bunk next to yours is 22, a conscript from Belarus who was told this counts as military service. He brought a deck of cards and a book of poetry. Hasn't touched either since arriving. Most nights, he sits upright, picking at his blanket edge, whispering numbers to himself. Maybe days, maybe sieverts. He says he'll get a certificate and a bonus when this is over. Enough for a car, maybe even an apartment. He says it like a prayer, a superstition passed down from men who didn't come home. Then there's the miner from Donetsk, older, broad-shouldered, always smoking. This isn't the worst job I've had, he says, which is somehow both comforting and horrifying. He volunteered. At least, that's the word he uses. They needed men to dig a tunnel beneath the reactor, to install a cooling slab. When he asked if it was dangerous, the recruiter laughed. Everything's dangerous. Now his hands shake when he drinks. His teeth are turning black. But he keeps digging, one bucket at a time, muttering that the earth is cleaner than the air up here. You meet a medic who never removes her gloves. She wears 2 pairs, changes them 3 times a shift, yet still keeps an iodine bottle in her breast pocket like holy water. Her eyes are permanently red, though she blames the dust. You watch her sit with dying men, taking notes while their skin peels away. She never flinches, just writes, nods, presses her lips into a line so thin it might vanish altogether. Documenting for a report, she says. You don't ask who the report is for. Some of the men laugh, not often, not joyfully, but there's a sharp, bitter edge to how they joke. They call themselves the Glowing Boys, the Half-Lives. They name their squads after chemicals, and curse like they're trying to expel poison through their lungs. One shouts, "I'll be sterile by next week." The laughter that follows isn't laughter at all, just a collective exorcism. If you can name the fear, mock it, throw it back in the reactor's face. Maybe it can't get to you. At least not right away. Others stay quiet. Entire units move like ghosts, heads down, faces hollow. You see them shoveling debris, scrubbing trucks, building fences around fields no one will ever walk through again. They don't talk about the work. Don't speculate about long-term effects. They're just trying to get through the day. You ask one why he came. He shrugs. Didn't know what it was. Now I do. Not everyone was tricked. Some knew exactly what they were walking into. Came anyway. Maybe out of loyalty. Maybe guilt. Maybe because they believed it was better to die doing something that mattered than to live knowing they did nothing. You meet a former firefighter who returned after being hospitalized in the early days. He still has burns on his arms, a tremor in his hands. When you ask why, he just says, "Someone had to," then takes another drag from his cigarette and walks into the smoke without hesitation. And then there are the ones who pretend it's not happening. Denial is a survival strategy here, a popular one. You see men ignore symptoms. Nosebleeds, nausea, sudden fatigue, as if admitting them makes them real. A man collapses during latrine duty, insists he just skipped breakfast. Another vomits behind the tents every morning, blames the food. No one corrects them. You start doing the same. Stop counting headaches. Don't mention the rash on your leg or the stabbing pain in your gut. It's easier that way. More manageable. Less real. You begin to understand. Every man here has made a private bargain. For some, it's money. For others, pride. A few cling to vague promises of rewards or recognition. But most are just trying to survive long enough to leave. There's no single reason anyone ends up here. Just layers of pressure, illusion, desperation, and force. You're all breathing the same poisoned air, working in the shadow of the same silent horror, each carrying a slightly different story about how it came to this. At night, the camp smells of sweat, smoke, and industrial soap. The tents creak when the wind rises. Someone coughs endlessly in the distance. You lie awake listening to it, wondering if he'll be there in the morning, wondering if you will. There's no heroism here. Not really. No speeches. No music. Just people doing what they were told, what they had to, what they couldn't avoid. And one by one, they're breaking. Quietly, steadily, invisibly. Not with a scream. With a shuffle. A slump. A sigh. By the time you arrive, the fire was out. Not the danger, just the flames. What you stepped into was the aftermath, the slow-motion collapse. But others came before you. In those first hours when smoke still coiled black into the sky and the sirens hadn't stopped screaming, they were the first responders, the firefighters from Pripyat, summoned in the dead of night with no information, no warning, and no gear suitable for the kind of disaster that awaited them. Most didn't even know it was a nuclear facility. They were told it was a roof fire, a standard electrical blaze, something manageable. They arrived in ordinary trucks, the kind used for house fires and traffic accidents. Wearing standard uniforms, canvas jackets, steel helmets, rubber gloves. Some didn't bother with masks. What was the point? No one told them what had happened. They ran hoses up to the roof and sprayed water onto a radioactive inferno, oblivious to the invisible fallout swirling around them. Some handled chunks of graphite with bare hands, brushing the glowing debris aside like ordinary rubble. One man later said it felt warm, like a stone from a fireplace. He didn't realize he'd already absorbed a lethal dose. The effects came fast. Within hours, their skin reddened and swelled. Eyes burned. Throats closed. They vomited in the trucks on the way back to the station, thinking it was smoke inhalation or nerves. It wasn't. Their bodies had started breaking down from the inside. Cells dividing without instruction. DNA unraveling like frayed rope. By morning, several were unconscious. By day's end, they were in the hospital. Not the local clinic, but Moscow, the best the Soviet Union could offer. But by then, even the best wasn't enough. The stories trickled down to your camp. Quiet at first, then louder. The man who touched the graphite, his hand turned black within hours. Another lost patches of skin with his uniform, as if the fabric had fused to him. One had his tongue swell until it cracked and bled every time he tried to speak. You weren't supposed to know any of this, of course. The official line was that the firemen were recovering well. But the men who came back from the city told different stories. Whispers of faces ballooning with fluid, of teeth falling out, of skin sloughing off in wet sheets like old wallpaper. They died slowly, not all at once, and not with the clarity you might expect. Some lingered for weeks. Morphine helped at first, then it didn't. Their bodies stopped producing blood cells. Organs liquefied one by one. Infections took hold that no antibiotics could stop. The nurses wore double gloves and face shields, but it didn't matter. The radiation was inside the patients now. It seeped out through breath, sweat, touch. Their hospital rooms became sealed chambers. When they died, they were wrapped in plastic, buried in lead-lined coffins under concrete. Their uniforms were too radioactive to burn. Some were interred in lead-shielded graves before their families were even notified. Back at camp, their names started circulating like folklore, not as cautionary tales, but as legends. They were called heroes, saints of the reactor. Their portraits appeared in state newspapers, airbrushed, expressionless, framed by patriotic slogans and red banners. You saw them on posters, young faces in dress uniforms, staring out with the blank pride of men drafted into mythology. You didn't know their real names, just the nicknames, the half-true stories, all repeated with the hushed reverence reserved for martyrs and lost causes. You don't feel like one of them. You came later, after the worst of the chaos had passed. You had more information, even if it was filtered through layers of euphemism and denial. You had a dosimeter for whatever that was worth. You were told not to touch certain materials, not to stand too long in one spot, to watch for signs of exposure. The firemen had none of that. They walked into hell thinking it was just another job. You know now it wasn't. And yet, the difference feels paper thin. You might have more data, more rumors, more half-heard warnings to guide you. But you're still guessing. Still hoping you didn't stand too close. Inhale too deep. Spend 1 minute too long under the wrong wind. The firemen became symbols because they died visibly, quickly, horribly. You're not sure what you'll become. A number in a registry. A case study. A rumor about someone who left Chernobyl and never quite recovered. Sometimes you wonder if they were the lucky ones. They didn't have to live with the uncertainty, the slow unraveling, the quiet rot that starts in the marrow and works its way out. They didn't wake up 3 years later with a cough that won't go away, or a numbness creeping up one side of their body. They didn't bury their own teeth in the wastebasket and pretend not to notice. They died knowing they'd done their duty. You're still waiting to find out what yours will cost. Their sacrifice is praised over and over by men who never met them, by officials who wrote the orders that sent them in blind. Every time you hear the word hero, it tastes bitter, not because they weren't brave, but because bravery didn't matter. They were doomed the moment they stepped off the truck. All that followed was noise and pain. Their stories may be remembered, but the lesson is always softened. The footage is grainy, the names mispronounced. The uniforms look clean in the documentaries. You know better. You saw what radiation does. You still see it every day, in the eyes of the men around you, in the cracks of your own skin. The firemen weren't the beginning or the end. They were just the first to arrive. And you, whether you admit it or not, are following in their footsteps. At first, it's easy to ignore. You wake up groggy, chalk it up to bad sleep. You're not in your own bed, after all. You're on a cot that sags in the middle and smells of mildew and antiseptic. The tent walls flap in the wind. A man 2 bunks over snores like a tractor with a bad belt. Of course you feel tired. Everyone feels tired. You roll your shoulders, crack your neck. Convince yourself it'll pass. Then comes the taste. It arrives slowly, like an afterthought. You notice it one morning after a debris shift. Something metallic, sharp, like a penny pressed against your tongue. You drink water, chew gum, rinse with iodine. Nothing helps. The taste isn't on your tongue, it's in your blood. You don't know that yet, but part of you suspects. The sensation is wrong in a way you can't describe. It doesn't fade, just lingers, like something deep inside you has started to rust. The nausea comes next, subtle at first, a little queasy after meals, then more frequent. You bend to tie your boots, and the room tilts slightly. You stand too fast, and your stomach lurches. Your appetite vanishes. The canteen food wasn't good to begin with. Lukewarm stews, stale bread, boiled cabbage that smells like wet socks. But now, even the sight of it makes your throat tighten. You start skipping meals. Tell people it's nothing. They nod. Say the same. Fatigue settles into your body like wet cement. Not just tiredness, heaviness. You move like every joint carries its own private hangover. Climbing stairs feels like a personal insult. You forget what it's like to wake up not sore. You try to power through. Drink more water. Take longer showers. Do stretches like the older men suggest. It doesn't help. The exhaustion isn't in your muscles. It's in your marrow. Your gums start bleeding. Not dramatically, just enough to stain your toothbrush pink and make apples taste like copper. You bite into bread and feel a sharp sting as something loosens along the gum line. A few days later, a molar aches for no reason, then stops. That worries you more. Pain means something's alive. Silence means something gave up. The rash on your neck spreads. It started as a dry patch, red, irritated, easy to dismiss. Maybe from your collar, maybe your rough towel, but it doesn't go away. It crawls down your chest, behind your ears. The skin turns thin, shiny. You scratch absent-mindedly until it breaks. Then curse when your fingertips come away damp with blood. You wrap it with a cloth. Tell yourself it's just a reaction to the soap. You try to ask a medic. She listens to your symptoms with practiced calm. Makes a note on her clipboard. Hands you aspirin. You ask if this is normal. Some men adjust better than others, she says. Tells you to rest more. You ask if you should be removed from duty. She doesn't answer. You realize she can't. Not without authorization. You thank her anyway. What else can you do? Around you, the same things happen to other men. You see them rubbing their eyes too hard, flinching at stomach cramps, struggling to keep meals down. No one talks about it. You learn to read the signs. Who's limping more than yesterday? Who's missing from roll call? Who stopped speaking entirely? You notice the men who sweat the most eventually stop sweating altogether. The ones who cough don't stop. The ones who vomit do it quietly behind tents, with the efficiency of something that's become routine. When you mention your symptoms to a superior, he raises an eyebrow, looking for an excuse to leave. You say no, of course not. He nods, probably nerves. The body plays tricks under stress, then claps your shoulder. Toughen up. So you do. You stop reporting symptoms. Start measuring them in silence. You learn what you can work through, what you can hide, what you can laugh off in front of the others. Your sense of normal bends to accommodate the abnormal. You still taste metal, but blame the water pipes. You still wake drenched in sweat, but blame the summer heat. You still forget what day it is, but so does everyone else. Eventually, you stop waiting for the whistle to blow. You know your time is running out, whether someone's counting it or not. Your skin is paler, your muscles weaker. You move slower than you used to. Your hands shake threading bootlaces. But you keep showing up. Keep working. Because what's the alternative? Sitting still? Waiting to get worse? Pretending you're not already on a clock no one can see? You start to understand. Radiation doesn't kill you in a dramatic wave. It wears you down, molecule by molecule, like a tide slowly pulling the beach out from under your feet. One day, you'll take off your shirt and find a bruise that wasn't there last night. You'll look in the mirror and see a stranger. You'll forget a name you've known for years. And by then, it'll be too late to change course. So you keep moving, keep lifting, keep digging. You stop wondering when the sickness will arrive. It already has. It just hasn't decided how loud it wants to be yet. You don't go to the hospital right away. Almost no one does. The men who go are the ones who can't stand, who wake up soaked in their own sweat and forget where they are, who pass out mid-task and only wake long enough to vomit into a bucket. You tell yourself you're not there yet. You can still walk, can still lift a shovel, can still pretend the ringing in your ears is dehydration, not something unraveling deep in your nervous system. Besides, you've heard things about the hospitals, none of them reassuring. When you're finally sent in, it's not because you asked. It's because someone else noticed. A medic sees your hands shaking too much to hold a canteen. A supervisor watches you fumble your gear 3 times in a row and decides you're no longer useful. They load you onto a transport truck with 4 others. None of them speak. You don't either. Everyone stopped asking. The hospital is a converted school building on the zone's outskirts. Desks removed, replaced with rows of metal cots, most occupied. The walls still have faded chalkboard outlines. Alphabet posters curl from the corners. You think of classrooms, childhood, then wish you hadn't. The air smells like bleach and spoiled meat. Fluorescent lights flicker so often. You're not sure if it's your vision failing or the wiring. You're told to sit and wait. So you do. The waiting area is already full. Some men are doubled over. Others sit very still, staring at nothing. One hums tunelessly to himself, a sound more unsettling than soothing. A nurse walks past with a tray of syringes. Another pushes a cart loaded with gauze, scissors, bandages already stained brown with something. There are no charts, no names being called, no clear order. Just a room slowly filling with men who don't know if they're getting better or worse. Eventually, a doctor appears. 30s, maybe younger, it's hard to tell. His coat is stained, unbuttoned. He carries a clipboard like it might escape if he loosens his grip. He glances at you, checks a form, nods toward an empty cot. You sit. He asks questions. Vomiting. Can you stand unaided? Lesions? You nod to some, shake your head to others. He writes things down. You don't recognize the words, but you recognize the speed. He's moving fast because there are too many of you, and not enough of him. They take blood, weigh you, measure your pulse, temperature, blood pressure. But the numbers don't seem to matter. No one comments. No one explains. You ask if you'll be kept overnight. The doctor says maybe, which means yes, but not because it'll help. There's just nowhere else to put you. In the next room, someone is screaming. Not constantly, in intervals, like the pain arrives in waves. You try not to listen. Try not to think about what's happening behind that sheeted doorway. Across from you, a man starts coughing up something black. A nurse rushes over with a towel. She doesn't look surprised, just folds the towel when he's done, and takes it away without speaking. You see a man from your unit. Yuri, you think. 2 beds down. His skin is yellow and shiny, stretched too tight across his face. He doesn't blink. You think he might be dead. Then his lips twitch slightly. You don't speak to him. He wouldn't recognize you anyway. The machines don't work. The X-ray is broken. The dosimeter is shared between 3 rooms, and only functions if someone smacks it on the side first. There are too few 4-poles. Some bags hang from coat hooks. Others taped directly to bed frames. The power flickers. Once, the lights go out entirely. You lie there in the dark for 10 full minutes, listening to the distant hum of generators, wondering if the nurses will come back. No one tells you what you have. No diagnosis, just a bed. The doctor says radiation sickness once, quietly, then moves on. The term means nothing to you now. It's too vague. Could mean vomiting for a week. Could mean dying in your sleep. Either way, it doesn't change what happens next. After 3 days, you're told you're stable enough to return to duty. You're not, but they need the bed. You still can't keep food down. You've lost weight. You have a cough now, deep, wet. That makes your ribs ache with every spasm. But you stand. You dress. You nod when they hand you your papers. The nurse says you've recovered. You don't laugh, but it's close. Back at camp, no one asks what it was like. They can see it on your face. You walk slower. Speak less. Flinch when someone touches your arm. The others pretend not to notice. They don't want to know. You didn't go to a hospital. You went to a holding pen for men who couldn't be ignored anymore. Now you're back. You're useful again. That's all anyone needs to hear. You stop thinking of hospitals as places of healing. They're not. They're filtration systems, identifying who can still function and who's already too far gone. They don't fix you. They just decide whether to send you home, send you back, or start writing your name on a list no one will admit exists. Somewhere, there's a file with your name on it. It contains your assignment, your vitals, your radiation exposure, and a handful of observations written by someone who never made eye contact. You've never seen this file. Of course not. You're not supposed to. But you're told it exists. And like everything here, you're expected to trust it's accurate, complete, and stored with the seriousness your service deserves. You learn quickly that none of that is true. At first, the numbers don't make sense. Your dosimeter read high, dangerously high, before it stopped working altogether. The medic who checked you after the rooftop shift made a note. You're sure of it. You remember her frown, the muttered curse under her breath. But later, when you're handed your exposure record for reassignment, the dose is lower, significantly lower. So low it makes you question if you hallucinated the entire rooftop. You didn't. The lie just fits better on paper. You're not alone in this. Men who collapsed during shifts are back on duty the next week with papers describing their symptoms as mild fatigue. One who vomited blood for 2 days is diagnosed with a stomach virus. Another who passed out carrying a contaminated hose is listed as suffering heat exhaustion. You start to understand. The records don't reflect reality. They reflect what someone decided reality should look like. Cleaner, quieter, less damning. Doctors are under pressure. You see it in their pauses before writing, the sideways glances they give each other. When someone asks about official diagnoses, you hear rumors of confiscated charts, rewritten reports, corrected numbers. One nurse tells you she was instructed never to use radiation poisoning on forms submitted to higher command. Instead, she writes stress-related complications or chemical exposure. Everyone knows it's a lie, but the lie has momentum. It's halfway to Moscow before the truth gets out of bed. And then there are the men who disappear. Not into the zone, out of it. You hear about them in passing. Someone in your unit misses morning roll call. Another says he was sent to a hospital in Kiev, or maybe Minsk. Weeks later, no one's heard anything. His belongings are quietly removed. His name isn't mentioned again. Later, someone refers to him as transferred. No one believes it. No one questions it either. To question it would mean drawing attention, and attention is dangerous. You see the posters going up in village squares. Smiling liquidators in crisp uniforms, medals pinned neatly to their chests, shaking hands with party officials under bright red banners. The men in the photos look proud, clean, healthy. You recognize those faces. One of them hasn't had eyebrows since you last saw him. Another couldn't walk. The photo must be old, or staged, or taken before his legs started buckling. Either way, the version of him on that poster is a fiction immortalized in propaganda too perfect to ever have been real. The official newspapers run stories about the situation under control. They print recovery timelines, praise the strength of Soviet industry. They mention radiation only in vague terms, carefully buried in paragraphs about heroism and duty. You read one article claiming exposure levels are comparable to a long-distance flight. You laugh quietly and tear the page in half. No one stops you. They've stopped reading, too. Sometimes you wonder what version of your story will end up in the archives. If someone opens your file years from now, what will they see? A name, a unit number, a radiation dose altered twice, a medical chart that uses generally stable 3 separate times, a discharge form listing you as fit for duty, even though your vision blurs, and your skin peels when you sleep. The truth of your experience, what you saw, what you felt, what you lost, won't be in there. Just numbers and euphemisms, stacked neatly in a folder no one will ever check. You stop hoping for recognition. Stop expecting an apology. The truth was never a priority here. It never was. The system is built to erase discomfort, to sand down sharp edges until the story fits the narrative. And you, in your sweat-soaked uniform and cracked gloves, are one of those edges. You are not a hero, not a victim. You are data, muted, shaped, archived. The worst part isn't the lie. It's how the lie becomes routine. You start repeating the official version because it's easier than explaining what really happened. You stop correcting people when they say the firemen were lucky to have masks. You nod when someone calls the cleanup a great success. You write letters home using careful words and hollow reassurances. Don't mention the blood taste in the mornings. Don't describe the hospital. Don't say what's happening to your body. You learn to survive inside the fiction, because the alternative is being discarded entirely. In a place where records are rewritten and pain is relabeled, the only story that matters is the one the state is willing to tell. And if your truth doesn't fit, it won't be corrected. It'll be replaced. When your time as a liquidator ends, there's no celebration, no real goodbye. They hand you a certificate. It's printed on cheap paper with a decorative red border, and a seal that smears if you touch it too soon. It thanks you for your dedicated service in the elimination of the consequences of the Chernobyl accident. It uses words like bravery and honor. It does not mention vomiting blood in a trench. Does not mention sleeping on a cot that smelled of chemical burns. Does not mention the ache in your spine that never left. Or the tooth that turned gray and fell out without warning. Still, you're expected to smile when they hand it to you. You're told you'll receive a medal soon. Not a big one. Nothing that comes with a pension or gets you saluted in public. Just a commemorative badge, shaped like a drop of blood or a reactor or a wreath. Something to pin on your chest at appropriate events. Should you survive long enough to be invited, you're added to a registry of liquidators. A term that sounds more like a sci-fi assassin than a man who spent 3 months scraping radioactive rubble into buckets. A reporter asks if you'll give a quote. You decline. She writes something flattering about you anyway. Back home, the welcome is quiet. No parades. No banners. You're not famous, not really. You're not one of the firemen who died on day one, whose funerals were televised, whose faces were painted onto government building murals. You're just one of the thousands. An invisible laborer in a disaster no one wants to talk about anymore. Your neighbors shake your hand stiffly, the way someone greets a man who's been abroad too long, and returned with a strange, lingering smell. At the factory where you used to work, your job is no longer available. They smile, say they'd love to take you back, but staffing has changed. You're told to check with the local office. Maybe reapply for something clerical, something easier on the body. You nod, but your body is already past easy. You tire quickly. Your joints hurt when the weather shifts. Your skin is thinner now, your nails cracking without reason. You keep these complaints to yourself. They don't fit the heroic image. Your friends don't quite know what to say. Some ask what it was like. Others avoid the subject entirely. A few start visiting less. You try not to take it personally. Once, you cough during a conversation and notice someone glance at your cup, like they're deciding whether to wash it twice or throw it away. You don't blame them. Don't correct them. You start coughing less around others. Not because you're better, but because you've learned it makes people uncomfortable. You're called to a small ceremony at the regional center. A man in a suit from the local party office reads a prepared statement. It's full of the usual words. Sacrifice. Soviet spirit. Triumph over adversity. You recognize phrases from the canteen posters. A few men you served with are there, sitting stiffly in the front row. One wears sunglasses indoors. Another has lost so much weight you barely recognize him. After the speech, they hand out medals in small boxes and take a photo. You're not sure where the photo will be used, if it will be used at all. Afterward, there's juice and cookies. The juice is warm. The cookies are stale. You sit in a folding chair next to a man who keeps scratching at a patch on his neck. You don't speak. There's nothing to say. A woman from the mayor's office asks if you'd appear at a school assembly next month. You say you'll think about it, though you already know you won't go. You're tired of telling the story no one actually wants to hear. The government thanks you once. That's all. No follow-up. No check-ins. No medical team knocking 6 months later to ask how your kidneys are holding up. You were a tool used in a crisis. The crisis passed. Now you've been shelved. Quietly, respectfully, completely. The cough gets worse. It comes in fits, usually at night, echoing through the apartment like a distant engine failing to start. You wake up with blood on the pillow more than once. Your partner says it's probably your gums. You nod. You both know it isn't. The clinic says it's probably nothing. Prescribes antibiotics. Tells you to come back if it gets worse. You don't. There's no point. You already know what's happening. You knew the moment your skin first burned under your collar. Knew when your dosimeter stopped working and no one replaced it. You still have the medal. It sits in a drawer with your discharge papers and a photo of your unit. All of you younger, cleaner than you ever really were. Sometimes you take it out, hold it in your palm, just to feel the weight. It's lighter than it looks. Hollow, like a coin made to fool the eye. You think about melting it down, turning it into something useful, but you never do, because some part of you still wants to believe. It meant something, even if no one else remembers why it was given. Home is quieter than you remember, not peaceful quiet. The awkward, careful kind, like everyone's trying not to look directly at you. The furniture is where you left it. The hallway rug still curls at the corner. The same window sticks when you open it. But something shifted. Your apartment feels smaller now. Or maybe you're just bigger in all the wrong ways. Heavier with silence. Warped at the edges. Slightly radioactive in a way no Geiger counter could measure. Your family means well. They ask if you're hungry, if you're tired, if you need anything. Then they flinch when you cough. Look away when you roll up your sleeve to show the rash that won't heal. At first they treat you like a guest, then like a patient, then, quietly, like a problem they don't know how to solve. They tell you to rest, tell you to go outside, tell you to stop worrying so much. Their voices are always gentle, but there's something behind the words. Hesitation, maybe, or fear. You try to slip back into routine. You visit old coworkers who don't say it, but clearly don't want you staying long. You walk familiar streets and wonder if people notice your limp. Your joints are stiff now, unpredictable. Your skin dries and cracks around your knuckles, even in summer. You see a friend from school across the road and almost wave, until you remember you look nothing like the version of you they last saw. You let them pass. They don't recognize you anyway. The doctors say you're within range. The test results are mostly normal. If you don't look too closely, your red blood cell count is low. Your weight has dropped. Your sleep is broken. Your stomach can't handle what it used to. But you're still technically functioning. And that's all the bureaucracy requires. You get a stipend. It arrives late. It's small. You're told there may be more compensation once the paperwork clears, though no one can say when that will be. You don't hold your breath. You know better now. The real weight isn't from pain. It's from doubt. You look fine. That's what people say. What they mean is, you don't look sick enough for us to take this seriously. You're walking. You're talking. You're not missing limbs or coughing up blood in public. So you must be exaggerating. Must be anxious. Must be reading too many articles. The phrase "you're lucky to be alive" is supposed to comfort you, but all it does is make you feel ungrateful for being broken in ways no one wants to see. You start to withdraw, not on purpose at first. You just grow tired. Tired of explaining why you're tired. Tired of saying no to dinner invitations. Tired of brushing off worried glances. Or the "you look pale today" comments that trail off without follow-up. You stop offering updates. Stop trying to explain that no, this isn't something you'll recover from. It's something you adapt to. Like a limp, a stutter, a name you didn't ask for, but have to answer to anyway. There are days you wake up and don't recognize yourself. Not because you've changed that much, but because the person you were before Chernobyl feels fictional now. He had plans. He had energy. He had skin that didn't flake off when he dried his hands. That version of you is gone. In his place is someone functional, polite, quiet. You make tea. You sweep the floor. You fold laundry. You cough into the sink and run the water until the red fades. You don't talk about it. The worst part isn't the distance from strangers. You expected that. It's the distance from the people who love you, or try to. They don't know what to do with this version of you. You're different now, and that makes them uncomfortable. They keep asking when you'll feel better. You say soon, and you both pretend to believe it. The gap between you grows quietly, like mold beneath wallpaper. You can still smile at each other, can still share a meal, but something in the room is always rotting. You get good at pretending. You laugh when you're supposed to, not at the right moments. You keep your sleeves down, and your voice level. You tell the story the way they want to hear it, emphasizing the metal, the teamwork, the sacrifice. You don't mention the blood. Don't describe the peeling skin, or the men who didn't come home. Don't say that sometimes. You still feel like you're back on that rooftop, breathing in ash that never really left your lungs. Eventually, even you start to forget what parts of your body hurt before, and which ones are new. Pain becomes background noise. You stop tracking symptoms. Stop logging meals. You learn to live inside the erosion. Your identity thins, like the hair on your arms, like the color in your face. You're still here, technically, but less of you shows up every day. There's no ceremony for this part. No ribbon cutting. No speech. No one thanks you for enduring the aftermath. You just wake up, open the curtains, and try to keep breathing through whatever's left. You did your job. You came home. That was supposed to be the happy ending. It isn't. You were lucky, supposedly. You came back. You can walk. You can talk. You can still remember your name on most days. When you sit in the clinic waiting room and look at the faces around you, that's what they say. You're one of the fortunate ones. But the more time passes, the more the line between lucky and doomed blurs. Because surviving isn't the same as escaping. And for every one of you who made it out, there are a dozen who didn't. Some died quietly in hospital beds. Others never even got that far. There are towns that don't exist anymore. Evacuated, bulldozed, renamed. Villages swallowed by the exclusion zone. Turned into ghost maps and cautionary tales. Pripyat, once full of children, swings, market stalls, now sits behind fences and signs marked with the trefoil symbol. Its buildings are overgrown. Its windows shattered. Its silence complete. You meet people who used to live there. They carry photographs in their wallets, like proof that life once happened in that place. Families were told they'd be gone for 3 days. Most never went back. Some homes are still full of plates on tables, toys on shelves, calendars frozen in April. The fallout didn't stay behind the fence. Wind doesn't care about borders. Neither does rain. It spread north, east, west, across rivers, forests, farmlands. Belarus got the worst of it, though they were hardly mentioned in the briefings. Milk was contaminated. Crops were pulled from the soil, still warm with radiation. Children were born with missing limbs, with eyes clouded white, with spines that curled the wrong way. Some breathed for a few hours. Some lived longer, only to grow up inside medical folders, thick with words like mutation and developmental delay. Their parents were told it wasn't connected, just bad genetics. Coincidence. You've seen the cemeteries. Not the neat public ones with headstones and flowers, but the restricted plots where the first responders are buried, in lead-lined coffins, sealed under concrete. No names on the markers, just numbers. No visitors allowed. Their clothing was too radioactive to burn. Their remains too dangerous to handle without protective suits. You hear stories about nurses wearing hazmat gear at the funerals, about family members denied entry. Some didn't even get a body back, just a form to sign, and a pension that barely covered rent. You see the long-term costs in the next generation's faces. Children with brittle bones, teenagers with hearts too weak for stairs, entire classrooms of kids needing regular blood tests just to make it through the month. Some of their parents were liquidators, some weren't, but the dust got into everything, into clothes, into cellars, into the fur of dogs that roamed the abandoned villages. No one knows exactly how far it reached, or what the numbers mean anymore. You stopped believing the numbers years ago. You meet women who were told not to have children, then told they were safe, then blamed when their babies didn't survive. Doctors shrug. Officials deny. Records go missing. You learn that radiation doesn't just break bodies. It corrodes the truth. And once the truth breaks, it doesn't grow back the same. You're not special. You're just part of a generation that was quietly erased. Not all at once. Not violently. Just faded out. Your cohort ages faster than it should. Your reunions grow smaller each year. You know fewer and fewer men who still work full shifts, who don't carry medication in their coat pockets, who can stand for more than 10 minutes without pain. You stop calling it bad luck. Stop calling it anything at all. It's just the shape of your life now. Warped at the corners, soft in the middle. Some men keep fighting. They file appeals, demand recognition, gather in crumbling buildings for meetings, holding up documents that prove exposure, demanding benefits that were promised and retracted. You admire them in a quiet way, but you stopped expecting justice a long time ago. You don't want another medal, don't need another certificate. What you want can't be returned. Health, time, a life uninterrupted. No office can give you that. The story of Chernobyl is still told. Documentaries, books, films. There's a version for every audience. Heroic, tragic, technical, apocalyptic. You watch some just to see how far from the truth they'll wander. Some get close. Others feel like fairy tales, with neatly drawn villains and carefully resolved endings. None of them mention you. Not directly. Not by name. You're one of the thousands in the background. Silent, coughing, ghost-like. Useful for a statistic, not for a headline. And yet, you're still here. You wake up. You make tea. You try not to think about how many organs are underperforming. Try not to count how many funerals you've attended. For men your age who used to lift iron beams like toys. You try not to imagine what your bones look like now, or how long until your liver stops pretending it's coping. You don't need a doctor to tell you the numbers. You've known since the day you smelled ozone in the wind and watched the graphite on the roof shimmer in the sunlight. Some people call you a survivor. Others don't call you anything at all. The state forgot you. History misplaced you. But your body remembers. The damage is printed in your cells, carved into your marrow like a signature. The legacy of Chernobyl isn't just a failed reactor or an empty city. It's you, and the slow, quiet way your body proves, year after year, that the accident never really ended. You did what you were asked to do, not because you wanted to, not because you understood the full scope of what was happening, but because that's what was expected. Orders came down. You picked up the shovel. You put on the uniform. You climbed the stairs, stepped onto the roof, and stood where machines failed. And men before you fell. No one offered you a choice that felt real. You moved forward, because backward didn't exist. There was no glory in it. Not in the moment. There were no speeches over loudspeakers. No stirring anthems rising in the background. Just your breath and your mask. Your boots sticking to hot metal. The weight of something unseen, burrowing slowly into your blood. The heroism came later. Printed in newspapers. Whispered by officials. But you didn't feel like a hero. You felt like a placeholder. Like a part that could be swapped out. Once it wore down too much to function. Maybe you made it home. Maybe you didn't. Maybe your name ended up on a plaque in a government hallway. Or maybe it faded from a list typed on a dusty typewriter and filed away forever. It doesn't really matter anymore. You existed in that moment. And that was enough. You stood in the center of a disaster that tried to erase everything it touched. And even if you couldn't stop it, you didn't run. That counts for something. Or at least it should. The world moved on. It always does. New disasters arrived. New headlines took over. The zone stayed where it was. Fenced off. Monitored by instruments that beep more often than they should. Scientists walk its borders now. Tourists visit. Pose for photos near moss-covered amusement rides. Some treat it like a relic. Others like a curiosity. Few treat it like a graveyard. Fewer still remember that men like you were once there with shovels and brooms, cleaning up what could never truly be cleaned. You left a part of yourself there. Maybe in the dust that settled into your boots. Maybe in the bunker where you tried to sleep but couldn't stop shaking. Maybe in the cough that never left. It wasn't always visible, the damage. That's how radiation works. It's patient. It lingers long after the applause has faded, and the banners have been taken down. It waits until you're quiet, until the world stops looking, and then it finishes what it started. But you mattered, not in the way statues are made for, not in the way that earns parades. You mattered in the quiet way, the way someone matters, when they do what others won't, when they step into the unthinkable, not because they were brave, but because there was no one else left to do it. You helped hold the line between disaster and denial. You helped buy time for the rest of the world to understand what had gone wrong. It's possible no one thanked you properly. That wouldn't be surprising. The thanks came late and uneven, and mostly in the form of paperwork. They didn't see what you saw, didn't breathe what you breathed, didn't feel their insides turn soft under invisible forces. But some of us remember, and some of us are still telling your story, even if it takes 40 years, and a midnight video to do it. So you can rest now. You've carried enough. The world didn't stop because of what you did, but maybe it paused long enough to think. Maybe in some quiet office or some quiet mind. Your work caused a little hesitation before the next mistake. Maybe that's the best any of us get. A little more time for someone else. A delay in the next disaster. A warning whispered just loud enough to be heard. You were loyal. You were used. You were human. And they sent you into something inhuman and expected you to cope. And somehow you did. You endured without fanfare. You broke slowly and silently, and far away from the cameras. You were built for none of it, and you did it anyway. That's what people never understand about men like you. It's not the strength, it's the silence. So close your eyes now. Let the metal taste fade. Let the heat lift from your chest. Let the dust settle for good this time. If your body aches, let it. If your memories come in flashes and fragments, that's all right. You were there. You remember enough. You can let go of the rest. The zone is quiet now. The birds came back, though they don't sound quite right. The trees are taller, but twisted. The silence remains, though it no longer feels sterile. It feels sacred, like something too large to explain, left its mark and then moved on. And under that silence, in the soil and the stone, there's still a trace of you. A footprint no storm has washed away.